some cookies and coffee, and yeah.
Great. And so they're joining us too?
Yeah, but I don't know if they're joining as a panelist. Do you want them to?
Yeah, so exactly what you did,
yeah.
We can bring them on.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, anyone who's interested.
Yep. So that we can have a nice discussion as we start rolling.
We're now live on Facebook.
Okay, and we're also live on Facebook, which is great. We see attendees that are starting to come in.
Okay.
Wonderful.
I'll be right back. 1 second.
Wonderful. Okay. So the weather is a little gloomy, Tracy, huh, in the Netherlands?
Yeah, yeah. But it was supposed to be really windy and stormy today, and I have to go to Eindhoven this evening and sleep there for this thing I'm moderating in the morning. So I'm glad that that it's not, because sometimes the trains get all gummed up when it's stormy. So
good.
This is fine.
Well, be safe, and we'll be thinking of you on the Detroit side.
Yeah.
And then you had a big week with Dutch Design Week, and all the coverage of the events happening there too.
I was there the weekend, and I moderated an event for one of the sub themes this year, Things That Matter, with some designers. And Ingrid was also there with a group of foreign people from the world of culture and critics, and it was all it was very optimistic. That was really nice to see. Yeah.
Good. Because last year it was more virtual.
Yeah.
Or really completely
virtual. Yeah. And I know that they were really nervous until the last minute this year whether they could actually do it live. So they were so relieved, and it was great. Everybody was so happy to see each other again.
I'm sure. And it's kicking off officially, or kicked off actually. Yes, was it yesterday that it kicked off?
Friday.
The 16th, right?
Yeah.
Was there a pretty big event that they did for the kickoff?
They had an opening party, but most of it was outside, and everybody. My husband was there. I wasn't, and everybody said they were freezing. Which is not good for the party atmosphere.
Yeah, well, a couple drinks and I think people will be
That'll help. But Saturday evening there was the ambassadors dinner, as they call it. Okay. And that was a great big party. That was really fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I see that we have quite a few attendees that are joining, which is great.
Great.
We'll start in a couple of minutes here. So it's 9:30 Eastern time. And 3:30 Central Time. And we will have the teams coming in from the Netherlands. And Tracy, of course, is going to be moderating this great panel today. So we'll start in a few more minutes. Welcome, everybody, as you start rolling in. Thanks for attending. And Andrea, you're good on your end with the team.
Oh, good. Yeah, they're logging in momentarily.
Okay, sounds good. How's everything in Chicago?
Pretty good. It's still very nice, the weather, and I like this time of year when the season change and the leaves. So I try to get out on the weekend as much as
Millennium Park has got to be one of the most beautiful public spaces in America. Yeah. It must be gorgeous with the flowers and walking through that field. Yeah.
It's very special what they did there.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And Pete, of course, on the landscape architecture side.
Yes.
Your Dutch landscape architect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Saskia should be joining, and Lillian.
Yeah.
Joining. Okay. You got them. Okay. All right. So good. Well, it's nice and beautiful in Detroit. I can tell you that.
Excellent.
Good.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous Indian summer, sunny, beautiful day.
Great.
We're inside, but that's okay.
Not like
Well-
last time when I was there, there was
Oh.
20 hours of uninterrupted rain.
During the auto show of all
Yeah,
times.
it was impressive and special in a different way.
That's a nice way of looking. Very optimistic.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, let's jump in. So, wanted to introduce our moderator today, and Tracy Mentz, who's based in the Netherlands. She will be running the show and the program for today. My name is Ivana Kalifatic. I'm the founder of Detroitisit. Wanted to thank everybody that is participating today. We're really thrilled that you're taking the time and you see the opportunity for this topic. We will have 5 panelists that are going to be speaking at 10. Tracy will give us some more information on 2 very relevant topics, which is sustainable urban design and the circular economy. And we have our partners that are joining the Kingdom of the Netherlands and also Dutch Design Week. So I will hand it over to Tracy, and we'll have a couple of minutes up until 10 o'clock with some questions and some good networking with everyone that's on the call.
Hello, everyone, also in the Netherlands and in the US. I am delighted to be part of this event, as I think I myself also embody that connection, being originally from California and having lived in the Netherlands now for pretty much all my adult life. One of the things I do is that I'm the director of the John Adams Institute, which brings the best and the brightest of American thinking to the Netherlands. So I feel a deep connection to this subject matter as well. I write about architecture and the built and natural environment for Dutch and American media. So I want to thank the partners, the Consulate General and Detroitisit, for bringing this all together and with a star-studded lineup. We thought we'd use some of this time to get to know each other, to learn who's here, how you heard about the summit, some of the ideas that you'd like to bring in. There will be an opportunity for Q&A after the panel. And I think it's also good to know that, as Ivana mentioned, we are recording this on Facebook and YouTube, so that this is a great opportunity for you to share your thoughts with a global audience on sustainable urban design and the circular economy with our panelists, both from the Netherlands and from the US. So I'd be interested to hear, whatever here means on Zoom, where some of our panelists are from. Perhaps in the chat, is that the best place for this, Ivana?
Yes, so we can take a look at where the chat's at.
Andrea van der Grint is in Chicago. Yeah, we knew that.
I just thought I'd
glad that you're here.
Get it started.
Yeah.
Doreen from Detroit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tracy, you had some time that you spent in Detroit also. I mean, you're familiar with Detroit.
I did indeed. It was 2 or 3 years ago, not that long ago. I was there together with the study trip of the Loeb Fellowship at Harvard at the Graduate School of Design. I was a Loeb Fellow in 2006, 2007, and they organized a study trip every year, at least when we could still do that physically. And one of them was to Chicago, Andrea, which was also memorable. But the most recent one was to Detroit. And I was really glad to see how the city is bounding back, the influence of philanthropy. I thought was really interesting. The power dynamics between city government and philanthropy. And of course, the housing market, which looks like nothing that any of us know over here. So it was really interesting to see how in so many neighborhoods of Detroit, you have these really well kept up, well maintained homes that people are clearly investing in. And right next door, you have an abandoned lot where the roof is falling in and the animals or the drug dealers have moved in. So that extreme conjunction of a normal city and the abandoned houses was really striking, unforgettable.
You know,
And
there's
also, it was just then that Michigan Central was getting started. So I'm delighted that we will have with us today Victoria Prouse, the lead for sustainability at the Michigan Central, to tell us about some of their ambitions for this iconic building.
And that the phase that it was in when you were here last is very different than the phase that it's in now. There's a whole lot of investment that's gone in through Ford Motor Company, and a lot of very interesting dynamics on the construction and the development side or redevelopment of that whole neighborhood around Cork. Yeah, so when you come back, you're going to have a lot of new things to take a look at within the city.
Yeah, yeah. You know what I really enjoyed too, Ivana, that's not so much, well, it does have to do with the feeling of community, one of our subjects today, but the murals at Easter Market.
Yeah.
Wow. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
really
I would say probably traveling, especially internationally, there's a couple of key like destinations that people need to go to within Detroit. The murals within Easter Market are one of them. The other one is also the Heidelberg project. That's always been something that people have been crazy about, the ideation around it and the origination of the Heidelberg project. But the murals at Easter Market, I mean, that whole neighborhood, the traction around there, and actually on our next panel on Thursday, we're going to have MVRDV Fedor Braun that's going to be speaking. That's part of the Glass Mural Project in Eastern Market. So we'll have topics to cover on that for Thursday as well.
And speaking of the market and of the food supply situation in Detroit, what also really struck me is the enormous amount of urban farming going on.
Yes, yes.
A lot of this empty land is...
Yeah, I mean, probably the last maybe 6-7 years now, there's been a real movement towards urban farming. There's maybe 7 to 10 truly very organized farms that are within the city and within the city limits that are feeding families and individuals in a beautiful, very healthy way. So it's an excellent. And
also getting kids more connected to nature and showing them that, that you know, Coke doesn't come from a cow. Milk does, but what does a cow look like? It's really pretty fundamental. But it's an interesting debate also about how can you really scale urban farming up to the point that you get systemic change and not just a sort of acupuncture of some worthy community projects. And I think that's an interesting discussion for the future, and also touches on our topics today. How can we make individual, sympathetic, cute, lovable projects into something that really impacts the system? I hope that's something that we'll be able to address today with our panelists.
You're on mute.
Here I am.
I'd also be interested to hear from our audience, and I guess that would be in the chat too, Ivana, who is involved in the design space or in development or in the circular economy. Where do you guys come from?
We've got some great people that are part of this call today, so please join in on the questions that Tracy's asking. There's some pretty great organizations, individuals, and investors and developers that are on this chat, and will be joining the rest of the call today, I hope. So please do. So you can definitely type in your answers and any other questions that you might have within chat, but absolutely, please join in and share with us a little bit of your backgrounds within the design space and or within development, and what some of you that are on the call right now, before we hit our 10 o'clock time frame, what is it that you are focused in on, and what are you doing? Or maybe there's something that
we know that Doreen is from Detroit. So Doreen, tell us more about what you do.
You know what, we can also do a little bit, Tracy, is make an introduction to the upcoming time frame at 10 o'clock. We can go over a little bit of what we're going to be focusing in on and who is going to be joining us.
Hey, Doreen.
Oh, there we go.
Interior designer and the first African-American president of the ASID Michigan chapter.
Excellent.
Kudos to you.
Excellent.
Glad that you could join us today.
That's a interesting, absolutely. That's an interesting opportunity to be in within Detroit in particular. So Doreen, we have, and I'm sure you know this, we have Olga Stella that's going to be joining us as one of the panelists today from Design Core. And you are, I'm sure, aligned with Design Core and the work that they're doing with the ASID chapter. So that's pretty interesting. Part of the discussion that we're going to be having with Olga also are the importance of inclusion within design and how do we manage that conversation. And of course, you know Olga, great. She's wonderful. Yeah, we can't wait for her to join us.
And this is a discussion we have to be having with all these parties, with big water infrastructure builders like Arcadis, but also a big developer like Related. And it's not just the people who are actually on the ground in the community, but the people working in large national and international companies that can really make a difference. Let me tell you a little bit about the program, as Ivana suggested. Mm-hmm. We will have a brief, I'll do a more coherent introduction when we actually get started. And then we will have a few brief introductory words from a guy named Jorn Konijn. Konijn actually means rabbit in Dutch. Jorn is an architect and he's the head of program for the Dutch Design Week, which of course is in full swing now. And I know that Design Core is also talking to Dutch Design Week to talk about a form of collaboration. Then I will introduce our panelists one by one. We'll have a conversation for 50-55 minutes, and then we'll go to your questions for them. And this is, I think, a great opportunity to really put the pedal to the metal. And don't be too shy, don't be too polite. Ask them the difficult questions, because I think this is a forum in which it's important that everybody ponies up and shows what they're really worth in these future issues of sustainable urban design and the circular economy. We also have two Dutch guests with us. One of them is Guido Braam. His business is called Powered by Meaning. He's a circularity guru, let me say. And the other Dutch person is Peter Weissmann, who is an engineer and has been living in the US now for 13 years. And works for Arcadis, which, as you no doubt know, is an internationally operating water infrastructure company. And from the American side, of course, Olga Stella from Design Core, as I mentioned before, Victoria Prouse from Michigan Central, and Ryan Friedrichs, who is the Vice President of Development at Related Companies. So, as I said, really a star-studded lineup, and I hope that you have lots of interesting and critical questions for them in the Q&A. And the very last thing we'll do today is make sure that you are sent a survey by email so that you can tell Ivana and her team and myself what you thought of the survey, and perhaps if something different needs to be done for the second part of this event on Thursday.
Excellent points. So there's some really good comments that have been coming in. One from Bettina on sustainable supply chain. That's critical and also part of the discussion that we're going to be talking about today. Disruptions in circular economy, great. Please make sure that you participate, Bettina, please, on any comments that you have throughout the session. As Tracy noted, all of the attendees will be muted, but we will have a Q&A at the end of the panel around 11 o'clock or 5 p.m. Within the Netherlands or Europe. Paul, we just also sent you also a comment back. Your windmill farms, am I saying that the Detroit Windmill Project, excuse me, is featured within the video that we have. So I'm hoping that everybody had a chance to see that video. Did we post that video? I think that we may have within the comments, but they look amazing. And Olga was sitting in front of the whole project, and they're kudos. And I really like this, which is the Detroit Ain't Violent, It's Safe. It's called Davis. So that's one of your organizations, Paul. It's actually something we should look into further for Detroitisit too. It sounds pretty brilliant. Thank you for sharing that.
And just for my knowledge, Paul, who started the this Davis project? Was that a community initiative or the city? It's funny talking to someone who can't talk back. Community led, okay. And is there a design component to that as well? Or perhaps more about economic reactivation? I'll be curious to hear more.
Paul will be joining us, so he'll be able to answer.
Okay.
Oh.
Hello, Paul.
Hello, hi, how are you?
Hi.
Yes, so Davis was started by a young man named Corey Beatty, who also works for the city. The city has an extensive alley clearance project, but the city is really only focusing on clearing out the alleys in Detroit, which have been overgrown for many, many years and abandoned and neglected. And so what Davis is focused on with alley activation is how to turn these into active community spaces. So yeah, there is a lot of community-based design involved on the sustainability side, on the economic entrepreneurial side, and on the social sort of recreational side. So the project on the east side, with Canfield Consortium, is focused on transforming one alley into a multi-use space, which will contribute to the resilience of the whole community, both social and ecological terms.
And is this a big issue in Detroit, the alleys?
There are a lot of alleys in Detroit. There are about 7,000 alleys in Detroit. And like I said, many of them have been
7,000?
Yes. So Detroit was designed around the automobile. So a lot of these neighborhoods are designed with alleys for people to bring cars in and out. So a lot of Detroit is dominated by single family homes. They often have, a yard and a garage. But with a lot of the abandonment of the city and disinvestment, a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of garages have been neglected as well as the alleys, because a lot of that garages face the alleys. And so when the alleys get clear, then the residents are able to look at that alley again and say, this is actually a space that could have a lot of potential uses. And a lot of folks that have been in the city a long time remember using the alleys when they were younger for, as like walking paths, bike paths, places to play when they were kids, a social space. So it's an opportunity to kind of recover those spaces. But because a lot of these neighborhoods are also afflicted with flooding issues, with a lot of environmental climate issues, the alley becomes another potential place to work on solutions to mitigate stormwater, to mitigate heat island effects, to plant trees, to add rows of pollinators, other elements that can add to both the attractiveness, but also the biodiversity and the resilience of the overall area. And plus the alleys connect the community. So they're a safer place to walk than the streets are. When they're clear and when they're open. And so I think a lot of people, when they see them open, start to see the possibilities of creating a kind of a capillary corridor that can connect the community internally and bring neighbors together around reactivating their alleys. So that's kind of the idea of the alley activation project. It's really about activating the community as well as activating the space of the alley.
Yeah, yeah. As I mentioned in my introduction, and I'll do another introduction when we welcome our panelists. I am originally from Los Angeles. I grew up in Pasadena, and there were a lot of alleys there too. And I went back there a few years ago, and I could not believe my eyes, the way these places had been cleaned up and made into places instead of just thrown away places. The greenery, seating, happy social spaces. And I thought, wow, I had never thought that that would be possible.
Yeah, and Los Angeles is one of the places that we've looked. I haven't been to see the alleys there, but I've read about what they've done there. And there are a few other places that have been doing different types of alley activation. I think what makes Detroit sort of unique has to do with the landscape that you mentioned earlier. You have these sort of open areas that exist in many neighborhoods alongside of, residents who have been there, for several decades in many cases. So you have this opportunity to have kind of green space development in and around, what is otherwise a fairly dense urban neighborhood. And so, and all the greenery of Michigan, which is, a little bit different than the situation in Los Angeles. Yeah. The plant profile and everything is different. So there's a lot to learn from other places that have done alley activation, but there's also a kind of a Detroit sort of way of
course there is
that's distinctive, I think. Yeah. I see that two of our panelists have joined us already. Hello, this is or three actually. Hello, I saw Guido Braam come into the panel.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you. Actually, I have a question let me first introduce Olga Stella is with us. And Olga, your connection is on your phone, but it looks pretty good.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
Fine, as long as it's working, we're happy. Yeah. And I saw that Peter Weissmann of Arcadis is also here.
Good morning.
Oh, there you are. Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Hello, good to see you again. Yeah. So we have just a couple more minutes before we go to our introduction. And Guido, I have a question for you from John Weinstein on Facebook Live. Very small question, very modest.
Very modest, yeah.
And the question was, please define the circular economy. Good luck.
Good luck. And that's a question for if we are live, right?
No, John is on Facebook Live, okay. And is asking this question of you. So maybe. Well,
I think, yeah, you can take 1.5 hours to explain it
exactly
to its full extent, but just to make it simple, for me, it's all about preserving value. So now in the linear economy, we take something out of the ground, we make something out of it, and then we throw it away, and then we accept that it depreciates in value in a very short time. So the circular economy is all about preserving value, and therefore not hindering, or it's also therefore solving our ecological crisis.
Well, John, what do you say? Okay, I hope he'll get back to us in a moment. Peter, you're the other Dutch person on this panel, unless I'm including myself. I'm sort of an in-between figure here, literally. You've lived in the US now for 13 years.
Yeah, that's right. Born and raised in the Netherlands, and started my professional career in 2005, and in late 2008 moved to the United States with my current employer, Arcadis, and the intention was a 2-year assignment, and so now a whole 13 years later, still in America, and life is treating me well, and so happy to continue to build bridges between the Netherlands and the US around things that we can learn from each other.
Absolutely. And we have with us Olga Stella of Design Core. and I lifted a little lid on what may be a news fact soon, that Design Corps is looking to work together with Dutch Design Week.
Yes, we're always looking for new partners and ways to help promote Detroit design around the world, and have admired what the Dutch Design Week has been doing for many, many years. So I think details to come.
Okay, good. I'll be curious to hear it. And I see that Victoria has joined us. Hello, Victoria.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Would you like me to say Victoria or Tori? Which would you prefer?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Victoria is fine.
Okay. And we have with us also Ryan Friedrichs of Related.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ryan.
Olga. Hi, Olga and team. Hey, everybody. Good to see you, Olga, and good to see everybody else as well.
Yeah. I'd be curious to hear from our listeners, if you could put this in the chat for us, how you heard about the summit. Because I think it's important for the team to know how to reach people who are interested in this on both sides of the ocean. So if you can let them know how you heard, I think that would be valuable information. And I'd also
Tracy, that's, I think, a great point to make, because we're very interested to hear both from our Dutch friends and, of course, from our Michigan and Detroit friends too. So great question.
Okay, Sherelle tells us here that she heard about it from the Twitter account of Detroit Greenways Coalitions.
Wonderful.
So.
Good friends of ours. We love the team and Todd Scott and friends. Great. Hi, everybody, panelists. We're thrilled that you're here. I'm Ivana, for those that we haven't met yet in person, but I'm really happy that you're able to join us. And Tracy's going to be handling beautifully and moderating the panel today, and she will give us an introduction to herself and, of course, all of you, the topics that we have in place. But I just wanted to take the time one more time before we hit 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock Central in Europe, that to thank everybody for joining, taking the time, and we certainly hope that this is going to be valuable information for you. And as Tracy noted, we are 100% open to taking your comments and hearing from you throughout the panel. We will have Q&A at the end of the session.
And I was happy to see in the chat, Ivana, that Dichandra told us that my company has a Google alert on all things development and Michigan. So you are
Great.
definitely in the public eye, shall I say?
Great, great. Okay, so I think we're sort of hitting 10 o'clock. We have our panelists. Pretty much everybody is here. Jorn, welcome as well. So, Tracy, the floor is all yours.
Wonderful. Ready to go?
Ready to go.
Good. Okay, thank you. Welcome to the first Sustainable Urban Design Summit, a two-day event in which we will dig deep into how sustainable urban planning and design and the circular economy can energize life in Detroit, Southeast Michigan, as well as Eindhoven and other Dutch cities. We will also be looking at how to bring in Dutch expertise to Michigan. On both days, today and the day after tomorrow, on Thursday, which will be moderated by Ivana, we have a remarkable international lineup of speakers from the worlds of economic development and entrepreneurship, architecture, urban design, and sustainability. This is the first of the two online summits. As I mentioned, the other one is the day after tomorrow. And I am your moderator today. I'm honored to be with you. My name is Tracy Mentz. I'm originally from California, but have lived for many years, most of my adult life in Amsterdam, where I'm a journalist, author, and presenter, and now hard at work on a new project, a podcast about water, which is definitely one of the topics we'll also be talking about today. I wanted to mention to you that the Sustainable Urban Design Summit was made possible by our partners. First and foremost, the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Chicago. We have with us Andrea van der Ginte. Thank you, Andrea, for everything that the consulate has done to make this possible. We're working together with Ivana and her Detroitisit, which must be one of the organizations in Detroit with the coolest name, a hyperlocal digital media platform, and Dutch Design Week. I was just there all weekend myself, which is taking place this week as we speak. And to see more about the program, visit ddw.nl. And of course, many thanks to our sponsor, that's the Sustainable Business Network Detroit. Please make sure to visit all their websites to learn more about the work that they do. I would like now to give the floor over to Jorn Konijn, who is the head of program at Dutch Design Week, to give us a brief introduction to the partnership with DDW and Detroit. Jorn, take it away.
Hi, Tracy. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're in the midst of the Design Week. I'm running around a little bit from one location to the other, so sorry if my hair is a little bit messy and you see a lot of stuff in the background going on. But I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy that this connection is made between Detroit and the city of Eindhoven, alongside this very, I think, important topic that a lot of designers and architects and urban planners are dealing with. I think our two cities are, of course, very different from each other. But on the other hand, there are, I think, some similarities. And one of them is, of course, let's say that both cities, I think, are rooted in industry, in large-scale industries that have been really transforming the cities, that really put their stamp on their mark on these different cities. But I think both cities have also struggled with something when these cities when these industries kind of leave these cities. Philips left in the mid-90s. And almost everybody here in Eindhoven worked for Philips. So this was a big blow. And I think what the city did quite good here in Eindhoven is that they really used design education very much to see if we could revitalize this city. I think the Design Academy, which is a quite prominent design school here in Europe, really has a catalyst function for this. But I think also the Design Week as well. We are now 20 years old. And really becoming kind of adults. Roughly 350,000 people visit our festival. You see some images here. And I think the red thread that you see throughout all the exhibitions that are all over town is this idea of sustainability from many different sides. So from materiality experiments to the relationship one has with products. I think this is on the number one of the agenda for most designers today. So I'm very curious to hear from the side of Detroit as well, what we can learn from each other and where we can connect to each other. I'm really looking forward to. I'm very happy with this partnership, and I wish you all best of luck for the coming days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jorn. I was, as I said, at Dutch Design Week these past 3 days. And I was so impressed by how optimistic it was. And I think after the lockdown, after Corona, I hope we'll also come to the impact of Corona on our cities. But I was so happy to see that the generation of the future has not let itself get down, be depressed and really has hope for the future. I came away very hopeful myself.
That's very good to hear, Tracy. And you led one of the debates here. I think there were 3 or 4 designers on show in that debate. I think these 3 or 4 that were shown really also embrace this optimism, but also being critical. And I think that's very good. So thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you, Jorn. I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with Victoria Prouse, who is the planning lead for sustainability and transportation at Michigan Central, which of course is one of the most famous buildings of Detroit. Who has not seen it, especially in its years of abandonment? But that is really in the process of changing now, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it from her. Victoria has a strong foundation in navigating community design and city building issues at multiple scales, and she will need them here. With experience in policy development and implementation, strategic planning, community engagement, and placemaking. And I'm really interested to hear also about the placemaking, Victoria, since this building stands there in splendid isolation. how do you give it any context? But we can talk about that later too. Victoria Proust, thank you. Our second guest that I'd like to introduce is Guido Braam. Guido is the director of a company with a great name called Powered by Meaning. He's a circular economy expert, and this year he was named the Circular Hero of the Netherlands. What does that mean, Guido?
I'm not sure yet, but it's a nice recognition for the work I did.
That's really good, yeah. So enjoy it. Powered by Meaning is a portfolio company that is intent on transforming the real estate and construction industry into a circular one by renovating obsolete buildings into vibrant community-based places. And he also just brought out a book called The Circular Route, which is a research-based book to inspire and help companies to go circular. So I'm sure that Guido and Ryan Friedrichs will have an interesting conversation. How do we get this industry on track or back on track? Our third guest is Olga Stella. Olga is the Vice President of Strategy and Communication at the College for Creative Studies, a private art and design college located in Detroit. And she is the Executive Director of Design Corps Detroit, a part of the college that works to position Detroit as a global source of creative talents. And they have some really inspiring practical examples. I loved your example, which has also been mentioned in the chat already, Olga, of the Detroit Windmill and Garden project that helps people imagine what sustainable energy could mean for them as individuals. That is so important. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. So thank you for joining us, Olga. And then we have Ryan Friedrichs, who I've mentioned as the Vice President of Development at Related Companies. He is working with Stephen Ross to lead its initiatives in Detroit and Michigan. And if I'm not mistaken, Ryan, Stephen Ross is actually coming to visit this week, right?
Yep, visits a lot. I try and get him to visit more, but he comes to Detroit, not to Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, where he likes to go as well. But
is it sort of like having the president visit with?
In Ann Arbor, more so than Detroit. I think he's gotten into Detroit more and more in recent years, but Ann Arbor has a long history there, of course.
Yeah, yeah. And Ryan has some really interesting examples of what Related is doing to create community, use different materials, all of them in often together in one and the same project. For example, your project in Santa Clara, which I hope you'll address, Ryan. And Ryan is also a combat veteran, having served as an intelligence and infantry team leader in Afghanistan with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And I wanted to say thank you for your service, Ryan. Our fifth member of our panel is Peter Weissmann, who is the city executive for Arcadis in the San Francisco Bay Area. And as you no doubt know, Arcadis is the global design and consultancy firm for built and natural assets. His background is in resiliency and risk management. So he is really on the money right now. He's been involved in multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects in San Francisco, New Orleans. I've actually seen that project in New Orleans together with him, New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. And he has a particular talent as a liaison between private business and government. And I think that's a talent that he can put to very good use now, as we all see that the urgency of water issues is increasing by the day. So those are our panels, and thank you for joining us. I wanted to start with you, Victoria, because I know, as Ivana mentioned also, Ford has brought in a huge amount of investment back into Detroit, which I'm sure the city is really happy to see, and also bringing new life into this iconic building, Michigan Central. For those of us, especially on this side of the ocean, who haven't been up to date on the latest news, can you give us a brief rundown on what's actually happening there?
I sure can, Tracy, thanks. So for those of you on the other side of the ocean, Ford Motor Company is investing almost $1 billion to create this 30-acre mobility innovation district. And so what does that actually mean? It's the idea of an open platform. So not a Ford campus by any means, but a space for startups, nonprofits, government agencies, corporates as well, to come together and work together to solve for future mobility challenges. And it's incredibly exciting from the mobility innovation aspect, but then you add on it being one of the country's largest adaptive reuse projects. And so you have Michigan Central Station, again, very iconic, one of the most iconic buildings in Detroit that sat empty for 30 plus years, was designed by the same architect as Grand Central Station in New York. Very beautiful Beaux-Arts building. And then you also have the Albert Kahn designed book depository building, the old Detroit Public Schools book depository building that is also part of our development. And the opportunity that brings to revitalize these old spaces, but also go a step further and be able to bring forward 14 acres of public open space for the community, and be able to remediate and restore the ecosystems that surround the buildings as well, is incredibly exciting when you loop that into the idea of mobility innovation.
It's also going to be the R&D center for Ford's electric vehicles, isn't it?
Yes, and so we already have a presence down here. I'm sitting right at in Corktown right now, at the factory building. But yes, it is going to be the heart of where the magic happens.
Yeah. In his presentation that I saw before this event, Ryan said that Related aims to connect the urban existing environments with the surrounding communities. And Ryan, as an inhabitant of Detroit for, what is it now, over 20 years?
That's right. I think Olga's got me beat, but she's maybe the only one on this panel.
Oh, I'm curious to hear what you think of the role that Michigan Central will play in Detroit, because anyone who's been to Detroit, as I mentioned, knows that it's out there in splendid isolation. Now, how do you work this aim of Related to connect the urban existing environment with the surrounding community if there isn't really much out there?
Detroit's a big city. I mean, Detroit is twice the size of Baltimore, is one way to think of it for those who look at urban design. Or there's always this sort of a very famous slide of Boston and Manhattan and San Francisco all fitting inside the boundaries of Detroit without touching the edge, right? It's about 100, close to 140 square miles. So it's a massive city. It's really a city of neighborhoods, right? And so, you know, what may seem disconnected to you doesn't necessarily seem disconnected to us. I mean, the train depot is really part of what I would call kind of an arc of innovation that you can see developing across Detroit, right? You have the Tech Town and Wayne State University, their life sciences work. You have really a downtown core that's done a remarkable, is going to come back in the recent years. You have neighborhoods around Detroit that are starting to develop. And really the idea that Michigan Avenue could be a corridor, right, that is linking to potentially even an AV highway that connects Ann Arbor, the airport, and the city of Detroit in a way that almost nowhere in the world is able to lead in terms of being cutting edge in innovation technology. I think the state has awarded one of the alphabets, the Sidewalk Innovation Partners, SOC Infrastructure Partners, CAVNU affiliate of theirs, a study to sort of develop that. I'm sure Victoria could say more about that, but that is really connective tissue all the way from Ann Arbor to the airport to Detroit to downtown. I mean, Detroit has these huge boulevards, right? These city streets that are 9, 7, 8, 9 lanes sometimes. Jefferson, which seems crazy in other cities, but it's just how we developed. And how does that become an asset now in the world we're in now? So I think they're much closer. The riverfront is sort of our crown jewel, right? And that links, right? They've developed these bike paths going up to there. So I really credit, Bill Ford's vision, Ford, and what they're doing up there and how they're linking it to the city, specifically through rails, trails, bikeways, a new Ralph Wilson Park, a $50-100 million investment from some of our foundation leaders down there. So I think I see them as part of the fabric and not separate from it.
To tell you the truth, Ryan, I'm really happy to hear it because certainly looking in from Europe to American cities, they seem to have so little, what you just said so beautifully, connecting tissue. And I'm glad to hear that there's more of that. And I think for me personally, that is such an important component of sustainable urban design. That's what makes a place rather than just a collection of buildings. I'd be interested to hear from you about this, Guido, I don't know whether you know Detroit, but I know this is one of the things that you strive to achieve with Powered by Meaning is giving existing buildings, Michigan Central or C Beta near the airport, giving them a new role in a new context.
Yeah, well, I was fascinated to see the building. I've never been to Detroit, but it sure is on my wish list because
especially after today.
Especially after today, also when I got the invite from you, I just happened to be reading a book from Geert Mak all about what happened in Detroit and how vital the role was of the industry that came to the city, and also that once the changes were there, how much transformed in terms of the central really changed, and the suburbs were still very vivid, if I understand correctly. So I'm very curious to find out what's happening there. And when I shared the picture of Michigan Central with our team, automatically on WhatsApp, there were a lot of oohs and ahs because that's typically a building that has so much potential because it has this historical background, but it definitely needs to be regenerated. It needs to be rebuilt. And that you don't only do that with circular solutions in a material sense, make it more modular, make it more adaptable towards the future by design, but also by thinking through what role it plays within the social context. So what is the program? Who will be the target groups? How do we make the connection between all these different target groups that are out there in society? And just to make a comparison, in Eindhoven, actually, we have the chance to develop something that is called VDMA. That used to be a garage in the city center of Eindhoven. It used to be an old factory. And we have the chance to, yes, there will be a lot of new apartments on top of it. But in the part that needs to be renovated, we have the chance to develop a program there with restaurants, with supermarkets, with event places, with workspaces. And I think you should start with what's the role of this building in the inner city, and then find out what concepts are needed, and then make the business case. Then what we currently sometimes see in real estate development, that we start with finding the tenants, make it a financial project, and try to sell it again. I think that's the important thing that drives me to invest in this.
And how does this compare to how Related works, Ryan? Does this sound familiar?
It does, and I was remiss to say also, I wanted to compliment the Train Depot on its community engagement. I mean, Detroit is also, 77% African-American, our last survey, right? It's a very diverse city with a historic kind of Black population that is kind of critical, right? As a city, has a big Latino population in Southwest Detroit, Dearborn, one of the largest Arab American concentrations outside the Middle East in Dearborn. It's a remarkably beautiful, diverse city. And how Ford did their community engagement to build those bridges with the community is something a lot of people get wrong, right? And a lot of companies don't do right. And I actually I was at the city at the time when that project was developing, and they I would say were best in class at how they did that outreach, how they did that connectivity. And that, in the moment we're in now, kind of a great racial justice, reckoning in the country, even more important to lead with racial justice as so many companies have, especially our autos, our major kind of iconic companies, and how that community engagement happened early in a very authentic way, I would say was critical. So to the degree I would lift up that project, not only for the geography and kind of connections I mentioned before, but I've long kind of highlighted it as getting something right that a lot of companies get wrong, especially in development and in design.
Olga, could you address this in the work of Design Corps and in education? Because a couple of the projects that you showed us beforehand, such as the Detroit Windmill and Garden, is also very much about community engagement and showing people what sustainable design can mean for them, and not just as some pie in the sky subject for officials.
I guess I would maybe rephrase that a little bit to say that we don't. So in addition to championing Detroit designers, Design Corps is the steward of the city's UNESCO City of Design designation. It's the only U.S. city to have received the designation, and we're very proud to steward that designation and to use it to connect Detroit to the world. And for us, the designation, and we worked with over 1,000 stakeholders in 2017 and 2018 to really try to identify what made Detroit design special. You know, lots of places have beautiful buildings and fancy, exhibitions and designers, and, really wear design very prominently, in their city. You see it, easily when you go. And in Detroit, this question of like what really sets Detroit apart, and to both the point that Ryan was making and I think what Michigan Central really exemplifies is this idea that we start to question who is the designer a little bit, and what does it really mean to where does expertise come from? I think for many of us in Detroit, we've many longtime residents in the city, especially who have been practicing, fighting for environmental justice, we're really thinking about innovative ways to use our vacant land to clean our air and water, who have just been working on these issues. Their expertise is often unseen because they don't have the credentials that others might have. And so a lot of what we've tried to do at Design Corps with UNESCO designation and more at the college around integrating the practice of inclusive design into our curriculum is to really help people understand what it means to design in an inclusive way. What does an inclusive process look like? What does it mean to have a different set of expertise at the table, and to really honor that expertise and not just have transactional community engagement efforts. And so there are many examples, including Michigan Central. I'm actually moderating a panel featuring Michigan Central next week at a different conference. So that's a wonderful example. The Detroit Riverfront's work along the Riverwalk is another great example with the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Centennial Park, but many examples like Detroit Windmill Garden, like Citizen Robotics, many examples happening in neighborhoods at a very small scale. And I think for Detroiters, this idea of sustainability, clean air, water management, these are issues that affect quality of life every day. And regular people are working on them every day in their own neighborhoods.
Could you tell us about Citizen Robotics for those of us who don't know the project?
Sure. Citizen Robotics, it's a 3D printing a company that is an organization that is working on 3D printing buildings. And they're actually located in Southwest Detroit, right in the shadow of Michigan Central in the Hubbard Richard neighborhood. And they're using robotic arms that were formerly used in the automotive industry and working with different material mixes, and will be working on 3D printing houses and other building components. And so, and trying to democratize the use of 3D printing for buildings. So their first project will be in Woodbridge, which is another neighborhood of Detroit, and it'll be an affordable home for a senior citizen.
The whole thing 3D printed?
Yes, the whole thing 3D printed. Yeah, it's and it'll be better in terms of just energy efficiency, the amount of time it'll take 2 weeks to build the house, to 3D print the house. The speed to market is pretty amazing. And then there's a high level of customization in terms of finishes and so on that then can be applied. So it's a really, what they're trying to do is really exciting.
Can we do that yet in the Netherlands, Peter? Do you know?
I know of a 3D printed bridge in Amsterdam that's gaining a lot of traction currently because of the old 400-year city, or longer, quite frankly, but the 400-year-old buildings, and having something as innovative as that in the city center. But I think as I'm listening to this conversation, I think maybe Guido and I should do a little exercise of how many Dutch cities would fit into Detroit, because it's quite a lot actually, and that that in itself, of course, makes it's such an interesting challenge that the canvas that you're talking about, that you get to work with, and the sheer size is huge. And I think from a Dutch perspective, it's unheard of to have quite frankly a playground for planners that is that large, but it also amplifies some of the challenges that you have related to connectivity and bringing amenities to your citizens or to your community, and really creating inclusive neighborhoods. And I think a development as Michigan Central can certainly serve as an anchor for that. But then how do you have the greater Detroit area benefit from that? And perhaps Ryan's example of re-envisioning some of the great avenues to create that draw is the way to go. And I think from a city planning standpoint, looking at other ways of having people move through cities and commute through cities, of course, is key to that. And while I'm not too familiar with the Detroit area, I think using transit hubs for redevelopment, and not just from a housing standpoint, but from a work standpoint, and a place to be entertained, I think is one of the keys to this. And I think also looking at the Netherlands, where the most, I guess, successful areas from a community standpoint is where live, work, play come together. And I think that's where the two can really find each other.
Ryan, can you address this from your own practice? Of course, Dutch cities are so much smaller and much denser, but this is also a way moving forward for sustainable urban design. Perhaps this is a moment to ask you to tell something about this project in Santa Clara, where it seems like you're doing everything that Related believes in. But I'm not going to tell the story. You can.
Well, I love to focus on Detroit too. I mean, I'll tie it back to Detroit in a way, but Santa Clara, for those who aren't familiar, is sort of turning a equivalent of a landfill, a golf course, and parking lots into really a 24/7 carbon neutral, very dense neighborhood, right? With increased transit, with increased connectivity and bike lanes and so forth. What I would say, Detroit, and when the materials I want to focus on too is mass timber. Mass timber is really something we're interested in, and I think I would love to talk a bit about why with this group. To Detroit, though, I want to talk in terms of its connectivity. There's a bike lane, a bike path. We're talking about a 30-mile roughly, named after Joe Louis, right? The great Detroit boxer, that has broken ground. Pieces of it have been built, but I think its ability to connect across the city and really to link in and be the opposite of what highways were, right? Which sort of ripped apart cities, majority Black cities in this country, especially Detroit, especially with Paradise Valley, the Black Bottom and area, our 375 highway just really tore apart. Can you build in a new way walkable, bikeable, connected cities with this bike path, but in doing it, not displace, right? I think Atlanta's bike line that we looked at when it was built, extraordinary, right? $3-4 billion of investment alongside it, even before it was complete, and the transit elements were all completed on it, yet 10,000 African-American families potentially displaced in Atlanta, right? Detroit how can we do that differently in Detroit? And certainly the siting of it and the locations. One area used to have 1 million tires in it, right? That I worked on, we were in the city on, but I think that runs right by the train depot, right? To bring that full circle as well, but it connects neighborhoods to the riverfront, to each other, to kind of a new way of moving through the city. What that highways represented before, this could and should be a new way to do that. So I think that's quite important. I would just say a word about timber to not go on too long. You know, mass timber is something we're very interested in, and I think the Santa Clara project focuses on that. You have something to the effect of 10 to 15% of the global carbon emissions come from construction, right? You have massive drops, you know, 85% I would say on trucking, 75% on construction waste that go down when you use timber. And timber is kind of like a carbon vault. If you think of it sequestering carbon, right? A metric ton roughly per, cubic meter of construction is sequestered, right? So when trees grow, when they decompose, you lose that CO2, but you lock in these kind of carbon vaults when you build. And so it's a great material, it's load bearing, and it improves in so many different ways. And that's the Santa Clara, part of the Santa Clara vision that I think is applicable to Detroit, is building with new materials, because construction, the way we build, which I think Tracy kind of teed off the conversation at the beginning, we got to do that better. We have to do it better, and we're committed to doing it.
Just to build on that, I'd say from a construction standpoint, 60 to 70% of a building's emissions are contained in construction, right? We're making buildings so efficient these days that we really need to look at the construction element to significantly reduce those emissions. So second Ryan is saying there.
Yeah, and Guido, I'd like to hear your take on this, because I know that Powered by Meaning is working on new materials as well, or a different way of using materials that we already have.
Well, to build also on the promise timber has, also the Netherlands, which we might call a sort of not a high density country, but a low density city. So we also have the challenge that most of our built environment is based on concrete, and we're now sort of in the revival of using timber for housing projects. So there is a lot of ambition that 20%, 30%, 40% should be based on timber. But therefore, there's a big change needed in the construction sector, because probably that needs to be produced in an industrial way to be competitive with concrete, because concrete is way too cheap. So we're in the middle of that. So yes, you can, of course, there's this route in circular economy to use more bio-based materials. And with the carbon capture, that makes it all even more sense. But there's this other challenge as well. So how do you design in such a way that it is far more adaptable, that it's modular, that it can be changed, that sort of in time, if there is a new functionality for a building, it can, without too many switching costs, alter into that new function. And it's, of course, now we're doing a lot of projects where we need to renovate old buildings, but it is difficult to change it by design. So if we have a future challenge, let's design it in such a way that it can far more easily be reassembled, or it can be far more easily be adaptable in the sort of the inner layers of a building. And yes, that can also be done with timber solutions or bio-based solutions.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, do you see related using massive numbers of 3D printed housing anytime soon?
Not necessarily. I think we're interested in it. It's innovative, and I think live, work, learn, play. That sort of scale that we build out. Don't do a lot of single projects or smaller projects. The things that usually are the scale of the Santa Clara project is what the sort of expertise. So I think it is a component, absolutely, perhaps, right? But it's the mass timber, and then reducing some of the dirtiest, right, concrete and the cement. So exactly what you were mentioning. That's where we have to focus on that now, right away. That's a serious. The scale of it is massive for us. I'll pivot to one other piece too that we just won maybe 2 weeks ago, or late September. It was announced from the governor of New York. and it's an affiliate of ours, I should say, Energy RE, but it was part of a Clean Path NY, $11 billion award that the state wants to run really underground transmission lines into New York City, build generation power, but it's one of the larger infrastructure renewable projects in the country, right? So I also feel like that's a great use, right, of development, right, that is not just doing buildings better, but actually building generation, right, building wind, building solar, and then building the transmission lines, right, HVDC, underground. So that's a tremendously exciting project that's very new, but I think it changes our role, at least certainly, it's one of the bigger renewable infrastructure projects in the country, and helping drive that forward. It's, again, a separate company, but our principals have invested strongly in it. And that is really exciting. And I'd love to see something like that in Michigan. I think Michigan is so well positioned for this. We have our former governor is the Department of Energy, Secretary of the Department of Energy, where Governor Granholm is now, our governor is the only governor in the country who ran on infrastructure and won. We have 20% of the surface water of Earth, right, sitting here in our Great Lakes. We are very well positioned to lead on infrastructure in this way in the Great Lakes as a region. And that is something I'm very excited about. And I do work on a lot with Stephen Ross. His sustainability is a real interest of his, as kind of outside of Detroit, but in Michigan, wider, leading in that level of infrastructure that we and our team now has in New York.
Okay, this is a great segue to Victoria, because one of the statements that you shared with us beforehand was that Michigan Central is committed to 100%, that's the whole thing, of the electricity for Michigan Central to be sourced renewably. What does that entail as you move ahead with the development of this, the building and the institution and the neighborhood?
Yeah, so we're really excited about making that statement. Ford Motor Company in itself has broadly committed to carbon neutrality by 2050 for all its facilities. And so with that comes to all the facilities being 100% sourced renewably by not now. I think Michigan Central is probably the first building to have that make that commitment, but more broadly, Ford Motor Company Bill Ford is very committed to sustainability, and so that is being facilitated through partnership with DTE and Michigan Green Program, which will really, allow for, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but just really sets a statement and makes that commitment for the site. And in addition to that statement, we're also looking at ways that we can commit to building renewable energy opportunities on the site in the landscaped areas. Energy is a really important aspect of our sustainability strategy. Detroit and other Rust Belt cities, probably Eindhoven as well, often have chronically challenges with energy production and facilitating green energy. And so one thing that we really have to remember is, we are coming into this neighborhood, this neighborhood, we are newcomers. And so how do we create a sustainable system around energy that we are not, this huge new burden on the grid, and we're actually working in partnership to be ideally net positive and a contributor. And so that's really our sort of long-term goal there. We did make that sustainable sourcing commitment a couple of years ago, actually, but I'd say since then, we've really grown and started to really tease out what that actually means beyond and really on the ground in terms of being good neighbors and really taking that hyper-local approach to what sustainability really looks and feels like in Detroit, in Corktown, very specifically.
But I can imagine, Victoria, that if I look at a project like Olga showed us with the Detroit windmill, making energy accessible for everybody and imaginable which is what it all starts with, I think. That is such a different scale from any renewable energy that you would be creating on site. How do I combine these two things? Olga, can you address that? It's all about community, of course, but on such a different scale.
Well, I mean, I think they're quite different. I'm actually definitely not an expert in what it will take to make Michigan Central 100% renewable. I think what's special about the windmill project is really about democratizing sustainable sources and making them accessible to people who might not otherwise be able to afford, solar panel or so on, and need power to do the kinds of things they want to do in their neighborhoods to make them better. So I'd actually kick that one over to Victoria, since it's not necessarily in my area of expertise.
What will this look like, creating your own renewable energy on site, Victoria? You're going to borrow a windmill from the garden?
It's certainly a possibility. We're sort of looking at all options right now. I think one thing that's really interesting and exciting about Michigan Central is sustainability is mobility hand in hand. And so when we're inviting future innovators to come and work here and set up an office, for example, it's not just a transaction, it's how are you going to contribute to the ecosystem as well. And what we really feel strongly about is sort of to what Guido referenced was really making these spaces outside and inside future-proofed and flexible, so that we will be able to adapt to different ideas, different ways to pilot small and larger scale technologies, such as the windmill project, as that moves forward.
Mm-hmm. Are there any projects in the Netherlands, Guido and Peter, that you know of that bring these technologies together and try to get community and energy production connected? It seems so obvious that that's the way we have to go in the future.
Well, I'm not sure if I can call it, name an exact example, but of course you saw also in the Netherlands, when we focused on renewable energy, there were a lot of bottom-up initiatives of people organizing themselves in a cooperative and not so much linked to real estate development. Mostly you see that communities within villages or cities, they organize themselves to fulfill that wish to become 100% renewable with the renewable energy. And then real estate developers have to commit to and contractors to legislation in terms of how much to make sure that these buildings comply to, for instance, all these norms we have. And then they sometimes do the minimal. And I think the challenge is much more that, I like how also Victoria positioned themselves. They are the newcomers, and you want to build up an ecosystem with the local community, with potential new tenants, and you want to build it up from the ground. So it doesn't start with the technological design, it starts with the design of, okay, what is our ambition here and how can we do this together? Yes, there are some great examples in the Netherlands, for instance, the Keuvel, where the community also had to build on a brownfield their own workspaces, and that was done also with, of course, the ambition to be 100% using 100% renewable energy.
Yeah, an interesting project that you should mention it. It was a group of people who brought up secondhand houseboats.
Yeah.
Brought them up
for €1.
For €1, yeah. Junk, basically, that was completely repurposed and brought all these old houseboats together with a walkway in between them. And it has become such a huge hotspot of young people who are interested in new use of materials, a new kind of social situation that you can create by using something, using that which is already there. Yeah.
I think also from a, I guess Victoria used the keyword ecosystem, and it's a word that's used in a lot of different contexts, but it relates to say energy and power generation. I think it's not a case of everyone generating their own power and being net zero for their own site. Ultimately, as an ecosystem, we need to lift each other up and benefit from the initiatives that are happening all around us. And I think if you look at the ecosystem here on the call with major asset owner, a developer, various advocacy groups, and myself on the engineering and design side, we also are a collective ecosystem that lift each other to a higher level by setting new standards, asking, perhaps in the case of Related, it's vendors or it's suppliers, or in the case of Michigan Central, to come up with new ideas. And that doesn't just relate to, say, the energy side or sustainability side, but also along the lines of perhaps supplier diversity or workforce development, that are key to long-term sustainability of what we're providing. And from my own organization's perspective, from a climate sustainability standpoint, Arcadis just 2 weeks ago committed to net zero by 2035. And in the architecture and engineering industry, I'm hopeful that a lot of our peers will follow, and hopefully with even stronger goals. But currently, we're one of the front runners out there, right? And that also means that there are a number of interim steps, right? Or interim milestones that we need to achieve, including that by the end of this year, we'll source 100% renewable energy already, right? And but it also means that the clients that we work with will be more critical of their actions, and our CEO rightly so, and as far as saying, the companies that are not signing up or their actions are not in line with the Paris Climate Accord, we will not work for those companies anymore. And so again, coming back to the ecosystem word, I think as a collective here on this call, we really need to lift each other up and make these steps to ultimately
we are the force, Peter,
where we want to be.
I'm really curious to hear from Ryan whether Related does indeed require this kind of thing from, for example, vendors and suppliers.
Yeah, no, I made a note to raise this when Peter mentioned that, the workforce component you mentioned. I love that. We have in the story, I just put it into the chat for the folks to take a look at. There's a $270 million fund, the kind of a public-private partnership that's announced alongside that transmission line award, specifically focused on workforce, specifically focused on kind of education and diversifying that pipeline. And then
this is the Clean Path project you're talking about, right?
Exactly, yeah, Clean Path NY, right? So that is a fundamental part of that. Is you have to add that the diversity of the workforce. You have to be part of that. Historically, but absolutely right now, right? This is something that is no longer an option; it's a must. So I think that that's critical. The other thing I wanted to lift up is, in terms of the, I'm not trying to solve this for the depot to get to the previous question, but Detroit used, I would say, it has been mentioned, so I want to mention it now. Secretary Muniz flew in, the previous energy secretary, to Detroit to cut the ribbon on maybe 4 or 5 years ago, O'Shea Park, which is a 10-acre solar array. I think it was the second biggest solar array in the United States, urban solar array in the United States at the time. Powers 450 homes. That's previously blighted land, 10 acres of formerly blighted land, right? A truly innovative usage of land that, again, 450 homes that it's powering. So to the degree, we can be innovative in our usage, and the train depots are going to be an iconic example, but Detroit has been a leader, already has been a leader. And that's, again, going back almost 5 years to just get to a previous question.
Olga, I know that workforce support is one of your key areas that you focus on and have made really a major aim in your policy at Design Corps and at the college?
Well, what we try to do is really promote the value of design and designers and help people understand, how they might leverage that expertise in their own work, and that it comes in many different forms. That again, there are many people working in design in Detroit who might not have formal credentials, but they have the know-how and the ability. And so what we do through Design Corps' Detroit Design Network is really help create a community of small businesses, Detroit small businesses that are looking to grow their business, and help organizations and others, connect with them to serve the needs that they have, whether it's—
Can you tell us something about the Industrial Sewing and Innovation Center? That seems very apt here.
Sure. So the ISIC, which is the Industrial Sewing and Innovation Center, is a great partner of ours. It's a wonderful asset in Detroit. It was founded by a group of fashion and apparel industry leaders here in the city, and is currently, their CEO is Jen Guarino. And what they're doing, it's a worker-led factory that is using technology and robotics and to not only build the next generation of apparel and industrial sewing talent that's needed for a wide variety, both of the fashion industry, but also a wide variety of other manufacturing bases, but also to support entrepreneurs who are trying to start fashion labels in the city, and to pioneer, sustainable, to start to break the cycle of fast fashion and the sustainability challenges in the fashion world. So wonderful. They're located over in Carhartt's flagship store on the top floors of their innovation building in Midtown Detroit, and are just doing some really wonderful things. They've been a great partner to a really growing fashion community here in the city.
Guido, is an inclusive workforce something that you talk about with your clients when you're talking about sustainability and the circular economy?
Yeah, well, perhaps it's good to explain that I'm not an architect, I'm not an urban planner, I'm just an entrepreneur trying to solve societal issues. So when we started with sorry?
That's okay too.
That's okay too. Oh, yeah, good. Thank you for that. No, yeah, I mean, I believe in that we as entrepreneurs have the ability to solve issues in society. And we started the Social Impact Factory as a foundation. And there we help out 800 young people in the Netherlands that don't have the same chances as everybody else has. There can be dropouts, or they just have a little bit lacking motivation, but mostly they don't have a network, or they don't have the access to all these opportunities. So we started to do this program to train them, to skill them as social entrepreneurs. And then it resulted in a building that I will share via chat in the center of Utrecht that is servant to that project. So it's the other way around. It didn't start with the building itself. It started with solving the issue. And then we said, okay, perhaps we need a place in the city center where all these sort of groups come together, where this ecosystem can sort of evolve even further. So perhaps that links a bit to the discussion we had.
Mm-hmm. How does that way of working sound to you, Olga?
It's great. It sounds like I'd love to see it at some point in person. And I think it is reminiscent of the kind of social networks and the connectivity that's happening here too. It's but I'd love to see the project at some point.
I just wanted to
welcome,
quickly,
of course.
Victoria.
I just wanted to quickly plug Michigan Central's workforce development program as well. And as Ryan alluded to, we engaged a very robust process to develop a community benefits ordinance with the city of Detroit. And part of that was this fast track job skills development program for local folks. And so by the end of the workforce development program, we'll have had 175 Detroit residents go through the program, learning a range of construction trades, including masonry, carpentry, electrical, painting, ironwork. And so I think that really speaks to the holistic nature of sustainability, as well as I think, you know, you'll hear us talk about innovation all the time at Michigan Central, but it's also, you know, a hearkening back to artisans and trades that have, you know, really phased out in some aspects. And for example, one that I really like is we actually reopened a quarry in Indiana to get the limestone that was originally brought to Michigan Central to build that up again. And so it's really exciting to see all of these craftsmen and tradesmen working at the station as well. And then I also wanted to plug, we actually, from a workforce development perspective, working with Olga and CCS and Michigan Central sponsored a course, a series of courses in which really allowed students to learn about, you know, urban redevelopment and you know, put upon their creative spin on how placemaking might work there. And so that was a really exciting thing to be a part of as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Ford can also, sorry, Olga, go ahead.
No, and for those who hadn't heard, this week, we, CCS announced a partnership with Pencil Design Academy from Portland, Oregon. And so Dr. Dwayne Edwards, who's a noted footwear designer, is moving Pencil. Pencil is essentially a free a design academy that supplies primarily talent from underrepresented groups, Black and Brown designers, women, to all the major footwear brands. And Dr. Edwards is working with the Lewis family to resurrect Michigan's only historically Black college and university. And so CCS is going to be a partner in that project. And I think, you know, to Victoria's point, a lot of what Detroit is about accessibility and about bringing people from different backgrounds together and finding kind of new ways of doing things. And so I think we're really interested in and excited about the opportunity to create new educational pathways, new opportunities for youth in our city to see careers in design and urban planning and, you know, business that they might not otherwise be, because much of the effort around workforce development right now is around kind of the places where there's a lot of need, you know, home health care workers, construction, and so on. And the overriding concern in Detroit is around economic equity and the kinds of jobs and opportunities that Michigan Central has to offer, that, you know, the Related has to offer, that we want to see come to Detroit, or really that we really have to create more accessible pathways to those educational opportunities for Detroit youth. So keep news. There's way more to develop. This is at the very, very beginning of a legislative process to reinstate the HBCU.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that when you think about sustainable urban design and the circular economy, the first thing that comes to my mind is designing and materials and sourcing materials and getting rid of them when you don't need them anymore, reusing them. And so much of our conversation has been about how important the whole social tissue is, the infrastructure underneath that, for this to actually happen. And even in a big company like Ford, a big company like Related, this is still what it all comes down to is the people at the who actually make that pyramid, and the rest is we're learning as we go, and we seem to be learning. But this is so important, especially in I think a city like Detroit, where well, the city has known very hard times and seems to really now be on the rebound. So I come away from this optimistic too, and I think we have a great network here actually as well. Olga, have you ever been to the Netherlands?
Unfortunately, I have not.
Okay. Well, we have some work here, and Guido has never been to Detroit, right? So now at least we all know to find each other. Ivana, I see you're back with us.
I am. We've been busy taking notes, applauding the whole panel, listening to the topics. I think what you just covered and the way that it was covered with all the panelists really left us with something pretty memorable and an opportunity for us to think through how can we really make change happen for the cities that we live in. I'm a believer that, you know, people make up cities, communities make up cities, the businesses that the people own make up the cities. The city doesn't make up itself unless you let nature run wild. So it's really up to all of us and all of us individually to take the responsibility to think through how do we build out the cities that we want to be the most sustainable and the most circular in the economy, because that's, I mean, as we all know, it's really the only way that we can go forward. I think another point that we could also talk through, whether it's now or later, but you know, at the World Economic Forum coming into Detroit on the innovation side, that's a pretty huge topic. And also secondarily touching upon what recently also transpired with the UN Climate Council. Those are huge initiatives that, again, how do cities within the Netherlands and how do cities within Southeast Michigan, Detroit in particular, apply those, let's say, standards or new rules of new ways of thinking towards the built environment. I think having people like those that we have on the panel today and Thursday can hopefully and certainly come to solutions for us.
Well, we can certainly tell that there's a lot of goodwill, and that's a great start. Perhaps we can actually get Ford to provide tech support for the windmill in the garden and grow that into the next source of renewable energy on the site of Michigan Central. Who's to say? Think big.
Tori, if you like it or not, you're being pulled into the whole conversation.
I love it.
Responsibilities on your shoulders.
I mean, no one can do this alone, right?
Of course.
It's all about partnerships. So
okay. Yeah,
it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah. Well, it's 11 o'clock, so I don't know who can stay with us for a Q&A. And if you're able to on the panelist side, please remain. And Tracy, I'll turn it back to you, of course, also. But Guido, Ryan, Tori, Peter, and Olga, if you can join us, please stay on for a few more minutes. If you have to go, we completely understand and can't thank you enough for your smart minds and the things that you're doing in each of your worlds.
I did have a conflict at 11, as Ivana knows, so I just wanted to say thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation, seeing my old friend Olga, who I've known for so long. It's really fun. And I just, you know, I love Isaac. She and I were in some of those first meetings about Isaac. I love that you followed it up talking about, you know, Lewis College, HBCU. Detroit, you know, was and is, you know, a center of American ingenuity, you know, and I think that's what you're seeing. That's what Lewis is representing, right? Those future Black and brown designers are the future coming from a city where so much of the past, right? The Arsenal of Democracy, the World on Wheels, so much music and art has come from Detroit, and that's what I think you're feeling again. And it's just so fun to be in these conversations that to lift that up and make these sort of international connections to it. Really was an honor. So sorry I have to leave a little early, but I was very, very happy to be part of the discussion here.
Ryan, before you take off, if I can just one last sentence, and then of course on Tracy's end, one thing that we're hoping for, and this is collectively also with everybody that's on the chat and the attendees, certainly let's maintain relationships here and maintain the opportunity to align and see the bigger picture together, because there's some brilliant expertise on the Dutch side, brilliant expertise on the US side. So I'm just putting this out there for everybody that we maintain the conversation moving forward to help build the worlds that we want. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Bye. So Tracy, before we head over into the Q&A, and again, for everybody that can stay on, please do. I'll just leave it for the attendees. If anybody has a question for any of the speakers, we can do a couple different things. You can leave it in the chat, At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button, which you can certainly press. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll also see a raise your hand, and then we can let you ask the question directly. So there's a couple different ways that you can chime in on Q&A. And please make sure that you let us know any questions that you have. Tracy, back to you.
I like the idea of people coming in with their question, because then we can see each other, and that's always more of a conversation. I was struck by the comment by Tanya Stevens. Next time, can we have Black and brown people in these conversations? Point taken. Thank you, Tanya.
Yes, Tanya, excuse me. And we will have this also on Thursday. I mean, we will be representing all individuals on Thursday. So extremely critical point taken.
One of the questions that we got was from Paul Draus. And Paul, I know we saw you during the networking session beforehand, so maybe you can come in about, you had a question, especially for Victoria, I believe, how large stakeholders such as Ford can help foster the innovation ecosystem by providing tech support. Was that yours? Yes, I believe so. Paul, are you there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth to the kitchen. I was just making myself lunch, but
I have time for lunch right now.
Right. Yeah, no, this is just, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about with Detroit Windmill. I know a lot of like local grassroots efforts like that struggle to find, support, especially in the technical area. So, I mean, this is a design innovation, but there is a technical component. And so we have this city that's rich in resources in terms of electrical components and electrical systems. There's a lot of potential for automotive components to be actually adapted to use for energy production. And this actually is a circular economy question too, because isn't it possible that we can actually take some of those parts that are coming off of vehicles that are no longer functioning as vehicles, but can still be used for energy production, for example, in the electrical engine or components, to adapt those to community uses. And that becomes a way to extend product life, also to give new value and enhance the resiliency of communities through local production of energy, because that there is not really a well-developed low wind, low altitude wind turbine market in the US. So there's still innovation that needs to be done technically to create the right components to be producing energy at a consistent basis in the environment that we are in here in Detroit.
Paul, I think that's a really great idea. I think one thing that comes to mind is from the automotive side of Ford, we've had some conversations with the engineers that are doing really cool things in research on circularity, on well-being and biophilia, and how that integrates inside vehicle design. And so we've asked, how can we adapt some of these ideas and thoughts at Michigan Central? And so I think, you're kind of speaking directly to that as an opportunity. And I also think because, again, we are newcomers to the neighborhood, if this project is, I would argue, of international significance, but if it doesn't resonate at a grassroots level, then we won't have succeeded. And so whereas Ford Motor Company proper, may have challenges with facilitating a sort of grassroots program as such, I think there's an opportunity at Michigan Central that we've been afforded in terms of really needing to engage with programs like that.
I'm going to jump in here because there might be some opportunity with Olga. I'm going to bring you back into the conversation. This might be very relevant with Design Core, and of course with what you're doing with CCS, the question that Paul had. But reutilizing talent on a ground level and the expertise that's within the city sounds like it's pretty much on par with what your mission is too.
Well, actually, we've been working with Paul and with Carlos Nielbach of Can Handwork on the project and trying to help find ways to support. So I know through the 2021 Detroit City Design Challenge and want to continue to find ways to support the project because it is really innovative and I think can make a difference for a lot of community initiatives. So I know I'm sure my team will be talking with Paul and Carlos offline to see if there's other connections that we can help make, maybe to, even to some of the other, either industry partners or other academic institutions with engineering programs. CCS does quite a bit. While it's a design school, it has partnerships and relationships with engineering programs at other institutions so that our students have that kind of full-rounded perspective and opportunities. So they'll definitely be following up with Paul and with the team at the Windmill Project.
Right. I'm glad to hear that today is not a one-off. I wanted to go back to something that we heard in the beginning in our network session. Is Terry Barkley still with us? Terry, you still here?
I think she might have gone.
Okay. Okay, I was curious because she said that she was the CEO of Inform, but she was also the founder of the Sustainable Business Network Detroit. And I was really interested to hear her take on a discussion about urban design and the circular economy when we're talking about the role of business in a city like Detroit. But I'm afraid
also great point. But that's something that we'll also be able to touch on Thursday. They are one of our partners also with the summit. I wanted to loop in because I'm interested to Guido and to Peter on your takes between what you're hearing with the Detroit focus of the conversation and of course your focus in on the Netherlands and international projects in San Francisco and in California, Peter, with Arcadis. But I would be interested if you can help us or think through what you think might be relevant for a Detroit audience to hear about some of the circular projects that you think might also be relevant within Detroit. So Guido or Peter, I know that this is a big question, but maybe, we talked about it already throughout the conversation, but maybe there might be something else afterwards now that we're sort of wrapping it up. There might be some other topics or thoughts that you have.
Yeah, well, I think, as I was preparing for this panel and what stood out for me from a California perspective, as I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and was kind of missing from this conversation is really specific focus on climate change and climate change impacts, and of course it's part of the bigger discussion that we're having around sustainability, but I think what in California, this very moment topic of the day is how we're climate ground zero experiencing the impacts of a changing climate, right? With year on year record breaking wildfires, the American West in an unprecedented drought at the moment. And so from that perspective, it's really stirring a lot of activity in terms of how to do things differently, because the general feeling is that this is not an episode that will pass, right? This is here to stay. So we need to adapt in terms of using less water in our communities, how we grow food, sustaining our environment, but also from the wildfire side, how do we plan communities that are more resilient, that are in this wildlife urban interface. And I think perhaps Olga or if Victoria can comment on this, kind of what are the direct climate impacts that Detroit is experiencing. And I think, you know, as you take this, you know, perhaps a Urban Design Summit 2.0 to next year, yeah, we can have a informed discussion around climate change, and obviously, you know, Guido will be able to, you know, share the stories of what happened in Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands this summer with, you know, unprecedented amounts of precipitation that led to many casualties. And so I think there's kind of the practical parts of, you know, designing new buildings and creating more connected communities, and there's the outer world realities that would just get hit with these massive climate impacts that require us to act today. So I guess that's another angle that I wanted to highlight here.
I'll jump in before the others just for context, and what you're saying is completely, of course, relevant. The way that this summit even started, for context, was when sustainable brands came to Detroit in 2019 and 2017. And I had met at the time an individual that's not with the government and the Netherlands side in that capacity anymore, but a very big proponent of this whole conversation we're having. And it really was around climate change. So of course you couldn't be more spot on. And Detroit, which Tori and Olga can certainly speak to, has been going through, or Southeast Michigan has been going through huge issues also on the flooding side, which you may have read about recently within the year, last year. And there's a lot of investment that's also coming in from the government aspect on that. So just for context, you're 100% spot on. And it is a huge component of the conversation. And Guido, obviously you on the European side, you've had a windstorm of climate issues that you're dealing with in Europe too.
And all of a sudden, oh, sorry, Victoria.
No. Well, I'll just go. I think one of my favorite things to talk about the site is our ambitious stormwater management strategy. And so I think, you know, we had set out to be bold on this before the summer, where unfortunately so many people experienced hardships because of the flooding in the Detroit area. But, you know, as a result, I think it only strengthens our position there. We are planning for a district-wide approach to stormwater with retention and detention systems planned for a 100-year storm event. And so I think from a community perspective, that's really important for us, as well as generally what comes in line with that, thinking about green streets infrastructure, reducing impermeable surfaces around the site, and what that will do along the lines of when we are thinking about ecological restoration of this former brownfield site, what can we do to reduce the urban heat island effects, to, you know, add back to the tree canopy of Detroit, and really provide spaces for shade and natural cooling for the neighborhoods. So that's another important piece. And I think the third point that I would want to point out is when we started our landscape design process, really started from, again, that place of local. And here's a Detroit air quality map, right? And here's how by, you know, different landscape approaches, different sustainability approaches, sustainable mobility as well, let's measure and monitor the air quality to the site and you know, endeavor to drive that down. And so all of those pieces, I think, Peter, really speak to your point in terms of thinking about climate, thinking about how climate impacts the most marginalized in our communities first, and what we can do at the site as stewards, as neighborhood, as part of the neighborhood to contribute to that.
I want to underscore like how important it is what Michigan Central is doing again for economic equity. because those impacts, if you have repeated flooding in your home and repeatedly lose your washer and dryer and your hot water heater and your furnace, and are delayed in getting insurance payments, or don't have adequate insurance or payments for the government, or if you have repeated days where you have to stay home because your child has asthma because of the terrible air quality. The community that Michigan Central is in is one of our most socioeconomically diverse and one of the most impacted from an environmental justice perspective. And so this investment that they're making ultimately will improve the economic well-being of everybody in the neighborhood. And it's just, I think it's from that lens that we have to think about this, because it's often the people who, who are excluded from these conversations that have the greatest barriers, right, to participating. That, and I think I really appreciate Tanya's comment about just even the makeup of this conversation. There's, I feel remiss in not saying something about it earlier myself, and it's really at the heart of this is there's real people who don't have the place to have a voice for themselves. And so I just really want to appreciate what Michigan Central is doing, because it's more than just the impact of it will be more than just like a brand for the station. It's really going to have an impact on the neighborhood long term.
Guido, can I come back to you to react to what Peter was saying about the role of climate change and sustainable urban design in the circular economy?
It's such a pity that 10 years ago, when I started to try to promote the circular economy in the Netherlands, that everybody was saying the next generation will be confronted with heavily climate change. And now all of a sudden we are confronted today. So we have these two challenges at the same time. So we need, when we're designing, also we're involved in designing new neighborhoods. And when designing new neighborhoods, they need to be climate adaptive, not only sort of finding solutions by greening the city and preventing the heat waves, but also being adaptive to heavy rainfall. And of course, in the Netherlands, we know what it's like to deal with, to struggle with water, to say so. So it's kind of a big topic. But at the same time, it will be like, in the Netherlands, we say, dweilen met de kraan open, like emptying the ocean with a thimble. If we do not change the way we now design and how we organize also ownership of buildings and how we create solutions that are also circular and sustainable in the usage stage of a building, then of course we can. We need to do both things at the same time, and I think that's the extra challenge.
Yeah, maybe you can just say a word, Guido, about ownership, because I know this is an important theme in the way that Powered by Meaning works. How important it is who owns the building and for how long.
And for how long? Yeah, well, that was the thing. I mean, I dived into the circular economy, let's say 11 years ago. And in the beginning, it was about promoting. And the essence of circular economy is that you need to benefit if you put in a lot of quality in the early stage. So the question is, who is the best owner of a product or of a building? Because that person, that organization is incentivized to preserve value. And I was not that known in real estate, and I was shocked to see that sometimes real estate can be about creating a new building, find a tenant, and then sell it through. Have a really fast exit. So we call it a split incentive. And then all of a sudden, there is no need to design it in such a way that you benefit from it in the usage stage. So we try to stay owner of a building. Therefore, we make different kind of decisions in design, but we also like to share the ownership, because ultimately the people, and that's what we've been talking about, the people are the ones that are putting value to a building. And so they should benefit from the rise in value and not just a company like ours.
Yeah, and they feel responsible for it.
Yeah, so yeah, you have a shared responsibility to preserve value, and it's more fair, to put it honestly. And this is a shout out, because most of the times it's about what are the kind of materials you want to use, how do you make it climate adaptive. But when I noticed when I was dealing with circular solutions that buildings became a sort of a financial product, a license to print money. And I think if we do not solve that issue, we will never apply these wonderful circular solutions that are already out there in the proper way.
Mm-hmm. To chime in, Guido, on what you were just mentioning, I think that that's one of the key ways of looking at how do we provide real world solutions to these challenges, and really ownership and building ownership and making others responsible, or everybody responsible for the product that they both live in and that they're part of, is a brilliant model in my mind. Bravo.
Yeah, responsibility and pride. Huh? I think the pride of ownership is also really a part of this story.
Yeah. So excellent. I think we can slowly start wrapping up, unless we have any other Q&A or questions from the audience, because I know everybody's time on the panel is also limited, and can't thank you enough for taking the time and being here a little bit longer. And Tracy, you're amazing. Thank you for moderating the way that you have so wonderfully. I'll leave it back to you to wrap up our day.
Well, also to me, the honor of thanking our panelists for joining us. And I think that we've laid the groundwork now for a really fruitful exchange also between the Netherlands and Detroit and Southeast Michigan. It's so obvious that there are so many things in common, and that we can have really fruitful discussions about the solutions that we're all thinking for these. And those are social issues, but also the technical ones, and the impact that corporations like Ford and related can have is just, and of course Arcadis is just enormous. So let's make sure that we harness that power and take it from here. Word of thanks to our partners, the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Detroitisit, and the Dutch Design Week. I hope that that partnership also takes off, Olga, and that will be enough to get you here to visit for sure. Glad of that. And of course, many thanks to the sponsor, the Sustainable Business Network, Detroit. The survey will be coming your way. Please take just a few minutes to fill it in and let the organizers know what you thought of it and what can be done better next time. Follow us on the socials, and make sure you come back on Thursday for part 2 of the panel, moderated by Ivana. Ivana, do you want to tell us who is on the panel on Thursday so that people will not be able to resist coming back?
Well, you know, I think we're going to have really great speakers, from the Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist to individuals from Bedrock, to individuals from the Netherlands that are going to be speaking. We're sharing everything on social. We're going to be on live again at 9:30 East Coast time, 3:30 Central in Europe, and asking everybody who's here, if you're coming back, to use your same Zoom link. And for those that are interested, all you have to do is sign up on sustainableurbanDesignSummit.com to receive your Zoom link. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with new individuals, new minds on Thursday.
Thank you, Ivana, for making this all happen. I thought it was great.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. And see you on Thursday, and for many more opportunities to come. Thanks, Tracy. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody in our panel.
Thank you.
Great panel.
Yes.